This system is simple, intuitive and effective. So if you're searching for something to play against the London, then this is an excellent option. I've been playing it for years, inspired by this game actually. So I'm using it as a model game. It was Sergei Karyakin against Mickey Adams. Let's see what happened here. So we had d4 on the board. Mickey started with knight to f6 and then bishop f4, pawn d5. We're now in a London system. So that's characterized by this bishop f4 move. We had pawn e3 now. White's going to set up this pawn triangle, keep a solid center, look to attack black on the king side. And now you can bring the bishop outside the pawn chain. In this system, we're going pawn to e6. Looks passive, looks like we've killed this bishop, but we're going to fianchetto it here. That's how it will come into the game. So knight to f3 from Sergei, pawn to c5 now, pawn to c3, knight to c6. And these move orders are a bit flexible. So after knight b to d2, the bishop comes to d6, but you could have played this bishop d6 a move or even two earlier. Now here white has a choice. If they take this bishop, this can be played, but black equalizes very quickly basically. You're getting pawn e5 in really quick and you've equalized the position. Equally, just coming back here, if you leave the bishop on f4, sometimes my opponents play this, say you go bishop d3, well we can simply take, pawn recaptures, capture here, let's say pawn takes back, and go queen b6. Again, we've got a decent game, no issues here. So what you tend to see in about 90% of the games is that after bishop to d6, white simply drops the bishop back to g3, black then castles the king, and now white usually puts the bishop on d3. If they go to b5, which you sometimes see, then we can drop this knight into e7. It's spinning round to f5, a maneuver we'll see later on. We're preparing pawn b6, bishop b7 with a decent game. So bishop d3 is the main way to play. Now we go pawn b6. And again, most commonly white's going knight to e5 here. If they do go for an early e4, then we don't want to be taking this pawn. Actually, we're opening the center a little too soon. Say the knight jumps in now. Again, bishop e7 is best. If you take here, then the bishop's coming in. This pressure's uncomfortable. Plus the pawn can take here. The queen can come out to a4, rook d1. It's all just a bit uncomfortable for black. So if they hit you with this early e4, then what you actually want to be doing is just nudging this bishop back into e7. Although white can go pawn to e5 here, the knight finds a home on h5. You're looking to pick up this bishop soon, and you're actually solid enough. If knight g5, you can take that one with the bishop. g6 can come at the right moment. Black's doing fine. In the meantime, you'll look to play in the center and on the queen side. But e4 is rare. What most opponents play against me is knight to e5. And now you follow up here with bishop to b7. They very rarely take here. If they do, we recapture, doing fine. What all my opponents do is pawn to f4. Bolstering the knight, looks really aggressive, but now we have this knight to e7 maneuver. And it's coming to this f5 square. Often white castles here. In this game, Sergei went queen to f3, but we're playing the same move, knight to f5. If that one's chopped, we're more than happy with this position. We've picked up the bishop pair. We're going to land a knight on e4 soon. We can kick with f6 at the right moment, move this knight out the way, open the e-file possibly one day for the rook. It's just a really comfortable position for black. So we don't usually have takes there. What I see more commonly is the bishop coming back to f2, and it looks really aggressive now because you're preparing pawn to g4. So you have to be ready to meet this move. And that's why this bishop now nudges back into e7. Its job is done on this diagonal. Now when g4 comes, you don't have to play like this as white, but they very often do. We come back into d6, and already black has a very good game here. You don't have to go g5, but most opponents do. That's what Sergei did here, a super GM. The knight hops into e4. Black's doing very well because this one now has access to f5 as well. Now if you take with the knight, of course we're just winning a piece here. If you take with the bishop, we can recapture with the pawn once again. Say the queen goes somewhere, well this knight's looking miserable, it can't come here. If it comes to c4, it will soon be getting kicked with b5. This one can find a home on f5. Really nice position for black. So this is the opening system in a nutshell. Really intuitive, the pieces just spin round, defend the king, and then you can start counter-attacking, and we'll see how Mickey Adams does it superbly in this game. So do stick around for that. If you're enjoying this video, hit that like button, let me know, and do consider subscribing to never miss a future video. So after this knight e4, we had castles queenside from Karyakin. And now this pawn kicked on to c4, the bishop came back to c2, and although black has closed the position, this is the follow-up. We're getting those queenside pawns going really fast here. Now Sergei went queen h3. If you'd gone pawn h4 there, actually it's just not in time. You'd see similar lines to what we see in the game. So pawn b4 comes immediately, and now the knight captured on e4 here. There was lots of pressure against c3. The pawn recaptured, and now the bishop came to e1, hoping to defend the king, but this is a really miserable bishop. I mean, look at the journey it's been on to f4, g3, f2, e1, not beautiful by any means. Now we had bishop to d5, so it prepares pawn to b3, clears the b file for a heavy piece as well. This rook came to g1, pawn b3 from Mickey, that one was captured, pawn recaptures, and the bishop dropped back to b1 here. Once again, another miserable bishop in this closed position. And now you can continue on the queen side here with moves like pawn a5, for example, but Mickey takes a time out to go pawn to f5, just trying to clarify things on the king side. This one was captured, opening the g file for the rook. The bishop recaptured there, and now the rook came to g4. What Karyakin is hoping for here is bishop h4, getting that big defender off the board, but it's all just way too slow here. So we had knight to f5, it shuts down on that threat, it eyes the e3 pawn as well, so you can't exactly go queen to g2, and there's just nothing for white in this position. So king d2 from Karyakin, he tries to run away, but this pawn's now very weak, and queen a5 starts to target that pawn. So the king came to e2, you really can't defend this one. Now the bishop took on e5, just clarifying some of that central tension. Yes, you give your bishop pair, but after captures here, this rook came to the d file, the king came over to f2, getting away from these bishop c4 check ideas, and now the queen invaded on a1. And you just can't hold this pawn. If you go rook d2, well, you're losing your bishop here on b1. So we had bishop to d2, spinning that one round, and now we didn't even have the captures on b2 immediately. Instead, Mickey goes bishop to c4. You can't take on e4 here, or you lose your rook on d1, and he's preparing to go bishop to d3 at the right moment. So queen h5 was played, a tricky little move, x-raying the rook here. Maybe you'll take on g7 at the right moment with check, pick up the queen if it ever tried to take here, but it's all just too little too late, because now the queen took on b2, the bishop is attacked twice, the king defended, and rook takes on d2 was the final move of the game. Here Sergei resigned. If you take with the rook, then we don't even need to win the bishop, we're actually mating like this. Queen c1 check. If the rook blocks, we checkmate like this, and if the king moves away, we checkmate on f1. I hope you enjoyed this video. To see my Magnus Carlsen versus Ali Reza playlist, click here. Thanks for watching, see you soon.